Stand up and face the world. Let me tell you,
all right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome to Civic Saturday. My name is Anshul Dar, and I work with Encore.org, and I'm also a Civic Saturday Fellow with Citizen University, and I'm going to be your host for this gathering today. And as you're all entering the gathering, I'd love for you to just turn to the chat box if you haven't already and introduce yourself to everyone. So if you could tell us 3 things: your name, where you're zooming in from geographically, and if you could tell us how is your community caring for each other during COVID, we would love to see that. So I'm going to let you all respond to those prompts, and I'll let the chat roll. So feel free to continue entering your comments in the chat as we get started. And before we begin, I just want to take a minute to thank Encore.org and give a really quick shout out to all of our outreach partners who've made today's gathering possible. And they include Caring Across Generations, the Fetzer Institute, Glide's Different Together Project, Global Citizen Year, Living Room Conversations, Make America Dinner Again, and the OpEd Project. And we'll send you all more information about each of these organizations in our follow-up email next week, along with links to some of the poetry, the music, the stories, and the civic sermon that you're all going to hear today. Now, for those of you who are attending your first Civic Saturday gathering, which is really exciting, by the way, so I want to give you an extra special welcome. I just want to take a minute to anchor us in what these gatherings are all about. Civic Saturdays are basically a civic analog to religious gatherings that were started by our friends at Citizen University. And they're gatherings of friends and strangers in a common place, just like this virtual one, to nurture a spirit of shared civic purpose. And the goal of these Civic Saturday gatherings is to really give us all the tools, the inspiration, the moral grounding, and opportunity to engage powerfully as citizens. So, since many of us met at our last Civic Saturday gathering back in December, I will say that a lot has changed in the world. And in these last 2 months, our country witnessed an attempted coup at the US Capitol and a second impeachment trial. And we've passed 500,000 deaths from the coronavirus. At the same time, though, the past 2 months have brought us a new president, Georgia's first Jewish and African-American senators, and coronavirus vaccines. And they introduced us to an inspiring new voice in Amanda Gorman, the youngest inaugural poet in US history, who's given us all a hopeful new vision for what our country can look like if we're brave enough to embrace it. So also during that time, in fact, it was right around the time of the inauguration, I had the opportunity to take part in this really powerful event called the People's Inauguration, where I had a chance to hear the director of Caring Across Generations, Ai-jen Poo, and she laid out this beautiful vision for how we can think about collective care for each other. And I want to take just one moment to ground us with this quote that I heard from Ai-jen, which has really stayed with me. And she said, "People on the margins are the real futurists in our society. Our tendency is to look to centers of power and influence, like Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, Hollywood, or Wall Street for the future. But the truth is, if you look deep into the margins of our society and our culture, that's where you can really see both what's to come and what's to be done." So in this next hour, I hope you'll all be inspired by visions of both what's to come and what's to be done, as we think about how we as citizens can collectively build communities that are powered by civic care. And you'll be hearing not only from me, but also from some very special guests. We'll hear original poetry from Menon, music from singer-songwriter Terra Naomi, storytelling from Dr. Kitty Oliver, and a civic sermon from activist and community leader Kate Hopke. Then we'll all have a chance to break into civic circles led by my friend and colleague Duncan Magidson, where we'll have a chance to meet each other and reflect on some of the ideas that we'll hear today. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to our first presenter, Menon. Uma is one of our Encore Public Voices Fellows, who's currently a freshman in college. She also had a poetry book published last year, which is pretty amazing. And she's been a passionate advocate for climate justice issues. I'll turn it over to her now to share an original poem that she wrote called Double Sonnet for Sinking Lands. Over to you, Uma.
Thank you so much, Anshul. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Civic Saturday event. And I'm so excited to share with you all a poem that I wrote last year in 2020 on environmental justice and climate change. This poem is really an attempt to grapple with questions of migration, environmental protection, and identity, which I think are really important today given the climate crisis that we are faced with, amongst many other issues. I hope this poem will help each of us think more about our place in this world and how climate change and environmental injustice has impacted it. I was born in the land of flowers, the gentle meadow, the land shaped like a bent finger and held like a caving palm. Like warmth, there is life everywhere in Florida. Here, where winter is green now, but soon no longer. I was born atop an iceberg, born to sink and melt all at once. And yet I was not, because gone are the days of icebergs. I was born not far from the sea, from ice in its mellowest state. And as I grew, I learned not to lose myself like the land loses itself to the sea. I wonder what it takes to drown a land in cold blood, to pile above her so much weight that eventually she becomes a fish in the sea. I guess that in Florida, we will all know very soon what it feels like. That is, if we don't become fish ourselves. And if we become fish, I will swim home with my mother to the place where she was born, the land of coconuts and green mountains, the land shaped like a banana leaf folded into a boat that never leaves the ocean side, even as it sinks under the weight of the water on which it floats. Water has so much power to call its own, to freeze, to evaporate, to sink, to float, to adapt even as we fail to tend to our land. Really, though, power is only what one can choose to do. Water never chose to be cursed, but neither did land. The choice could only have been ours. But then again, I never chose to love two sinking lands. I loved them because I had no choice. They were already sinking before I was born. And now I am hoping I can be enough. Thank you so much.
Wow, Uma, thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. And I think that your poetry is giving us all this really special lens to look at the issues of climate justice and civic care together. Thank you so much, Uma. So now I want to introduce you all to our next presenter, Terra Naomi. And Terra is a singer-songwriter from Los Angeles. I know you're all going to enjoy hearing her music as much as I do. Terra, thank you so much for sharing your gifts with us today. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Anshul, and thank you, everybody. Uma, that was so beautiful. Wow, a really wonderful, inspiring way to start off the day here. And just getting a few things ready. So when Anshul told me about this gathering, I was inspired to sing this song. It's not one of mine, but I'm sure you will recognize it, by the wonderful songwriter and poet Bob Dylan. And the thing that I love about this, especially when thinking about the concept of caring for each other in community, is how inclusive it is. It's welcoming. It's not, it's talking about these huge changes that need to happen. And I feel like that's where we are too. These massive changes that need to happen and are happening, like it or not. And instead of sort of singling people out and saying, you do this or you haven't done this or whatever, it's saying, come, be part of this. And I love that inclusive nature of this song and these words. And that's sort of, I think, part of, to me, what caring for community means. Finding a way to be inclusive and call people in. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming, for the loser now will later to win, for the times they are changing. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are changing. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand, for the times they are changing. The line it is drawn and the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are changing.
Terra, that was amazing. Love hearing your voice. And I just have to say that before my friend and colleague Sarah introduced me to Terra, I fell in love with her art and her design work. You are a woman of so many talents, and we are so lucky to have you here with us today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Terra. I'm so excited to introduce you all to our next presenter, Dr. Kitty Oliver. Kitty is an Encore Public Voices Fellow as well, and an oral historian. And she shows us what's possible when we bring people together in a meaningful way to share stories of race and change across generations. And as you'll all hear soon, Kitty has this amazing gift of blending stories, music, and her own life experiences together. And she ends up creating this really unique form of storytelling that has a hopeful, healing message. Today, Kitty's going to share one of her stories with us called A Gesture of Care. Over to you, Kitty.
Thank you. Boy, Tara, that brings back a lot of memories. We're living in a world of uncertainty, looking at the signs that tell us how dark the future will be. The questions, they may keep us wondering, solutions may be slow in coming, but we are here and now to answer the calling of our time. I was 16 when I first answered that call. It was during the civil rights movement in the South, a time of great turmoil and new possibilities, very much like today. I volunteered to participate for a few days in a YMCA voter registration drive in a rural Black area outside the city limits, and I ended up having my first close contact with white people. In my memoir, Multicolored Memories of a Black Southern Girl, I recall squeezing into a seat between two white girls who chatted past my head and being afraid to shift around too much because I didn't want them to sense my feelings. The discomfort was there, but there was also the exciting sensation of being within breathing space of something so alien, so forbidden, and yet so accessible. What I remember most, however, is a gesture of care. Just imagine. Sometimes a face would linger at the door that opened when we knocked, staring at the color contrast, I was sure. Ellen and Sandy talked while I shyly thrust leaflets into reluctant hands and smiled, feeling like an idiot. The first time I felt the warm hand of one of the girls on my back, I flinched from the surprise of the tender touch. "Good job," she said casually as we continued on in the midday heat. Perhaps the experience would have been the same with any group of older people taking an interest in an impressionable teenager. But these were combative times. Life was cruel, we were told. We had to be tough to survive in the white world we would enter. Our battle lessons had begun early in elementary school. 2 weeks later, they invited me to the Y for a farewell gathering at the end of the voting drive. That night, a soft cushion of hair clouded Ellen's face as she strummed her acoustic guitar, and the chords resonated with me. "Freedom now," she sang to the tune of the song Edelweiss. Her thin soprano blanketed the room. "Freedom now, I can feel it coming everywhere if we dare to stand and fight for freedom." A warm feeling settled over me and my back relaxed into the wall as I sat on the floor listening. An arm stretched down from above to hand me a soda. I glimpsed Sandy sprawled on one of the beds across the room, nodding with eyes closed. A Black couple darting in and out of the adjacent doorway in animated conversation caught my eye. I hadn't seen them before because they didn't canvass with us. I was transfixed at how they traded jokes, exuding confidence, blending in. "Segregation's a word of man, my brother." The young man strode into the room, careful of heads and hands. He gave Sandy a playful slap on the thigh as he passed her by. "He's been wrong, but it won't be long till we all live together." As the timbre of Ellen's voice rose with the final notes, the students stood up, linking arms and waist and rocking together. I joined them, humming along awkwardly. My world did not change, at least not then, but I was aware of changes in the way I began to see the world. It's a long ago memory I still carry with me in 2021, and I share it in my Race and Change work. A simple gesture of care can profoundly affect a person's life. Just imagine the ripple effect it can have in our communities. We are here to stand for justice. We are here to stand for freedom. We are here to stand for healing. We are here to stand for peace, and we are not alone. We are not alone. We're never alone. We're never alone. We are here to answer to the calling of our time. Thank you.
That was so beautiful. Thank you, Kitty. And I think a lot of us can appreciate that idea that you mentioned of the power of a simple gesture and how it can really transform the way that we see the world, especially in these times. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. So next up, we have a very special civic sermon from Kate Hopke. Not only is Kate an alum of our Encore Public Voices Fellowship, but she's also a friend of mine. And Kate taught me how to literally turn my anxiety into action when shelter in place first went into effect in San Francisco almost 1 year ago. Because of Kate, I can share with you all that I'm transforming that energy into civic care these days by bringing people together in gatherings just like this one. So thank you so much, Kate. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Wow. Thank you, Anchal. I am really privileged to be a part of this group of talented people that we've heard from this morning. Thank you so much for inviting me to respond to your sermon on the topic of a civic love language that you gave last December, and consider what it looks like in action. Anchal said that civic love starts with connection at the level of the heart. To me, that sounds like care, caring for others outside my family, and it's the root structure of community building. I've been a community builder for 35 years, born out of my own need to feel connected and cared for. In the 1980s and 90s, as a young mom, I helped to create social support networks for young families. And in the 2000s, I built caring communities for older adults called villages. Until I was in my 60s, I thought I was caring for other people's parents because mine were so far away. Now I realize I've also been laying the groundwork for my own aging journey. I'm the executive director of San Francisco Village and a founding partner of Village Movement California. I like to say I'm in the business of operationalizing love, connecting people of all ages so they feel seen, heard, valued, and integral. Across the generational spectrum, people are experiencing alarming rates of loneliness and alienation, resulting in a deep malaise that comes from not knowing how and to whom we belong. As a people, we're suffering a crisis of connection. Anjal's question about individualism versus collectivism is at the root of this crisis. We live in a society organized by hierarchies that divide people and pit us against each other. Social scientists like Carol Gilligan tell us that we've been captive to a false story about who we are as humans. This false narrative of individualism, the water in which we swim, privileges self over relationships and individual success over the common good. It's a story, centuries old, that runs counter to 21st century neuroscience. The truth is that as humans, we are inherently relational, responsive beings, and the human condition is one of connectedness or interdependence, an inescapable network of mutuality, as Martin Luther King described it. Social science tells us that altruism and cooperation are key factors in our survival as a species. We're wired to need each other. How do we reconcile the neuroscience with the force of individualism that has undermined our human potential for more than 2 centuries? It's big. We're going to need healing on a grand scale. It will require that open heart that Anchal talked about and deep wells of courage to answer the call of evolutionary change that is ours to answer. As one person, it is difficult to know what is mine to do. But I think that starting with daily interactions, we can help shape a new ethos of empathy, caring, and trust, which will procreate. Brené Brown says that trust is built in small moments. Listening without judgment. Letting someone help us. Being open with our feelings and telling the truth. I would argue these are also acts of civic care. In my work, I have the privilege of curating opportunities for people to express who they are in relation to others. Different forms of interaction with people that they wouldn't have met otherwise. Not family, not old friends, fellow San Franciscans, fellow humans. Millennials grocery shopping for their older neighbors during the pandemic. Teenagers explaining intersectionality to a group of 80-year-olds. Elders shaking off 12 months of forced isolation in an online improv class. In every case, people stepping forward in their vulnerability to let themselves be changed by the presence of someone else. These brave acts of being seen and known outside our family are critical to healing our crisis of connection. Mark Nepo tells a beautiful story in his Book of Awakening about African bushmen who greet each other coming out of the brush by saying, "I see you." The one emerging responds, "I am here." Nepo says this timeless bearing witness is both simple and profound. And it is telling that much of our modern therapeutic journey is suffered to this end, to have who we are and where we've been be seen. He goes on to explain that this simple affirmation allows us to claim our own presence, our own power. I am here. I matter. I belong. One of the gifts of the pandemic is meeting a new friend, Brittany Bear, a social entrepreneur in her early 30s who shares my vision for intergenerational connection and healing. Currently, we're co-facilitating a series of conversations for women aged 30 to 80 about how we developed our civic consciousness and our responsibility to care for people outside our families. Sharing personal stories, we're asking each other questions about identity, privilege, values, and lived experience that reveal how we know ourselves as members of society and the communities that we belong to. We're interested in patterns that live inside of us, key experiences that repeat themselves or point to a universal theme, evidence that we all belong to a much larger human story. Participation in dialogues like these is itself an act of civic care. Grounded in humility and curiosity, this simple structure provides the space for people to connect first with themselves and their own inner knowing, then with a fellow traveler who's generously agreed to act as witness and confidant. Over time, these partners can develop a practice that nurtures their self-worth and sense of efficacy in the world, paying attention, listening, responding. There are a few simple ground rules, like equal voice, no age-related ranking. I think you older people know what I'm talking about. Speaking from your own experience and using active listening skills. There is nothing more affirming than hearing our own words come back to us through the filter of someone who believes in their power. We listen each other into speech, and in the process, we shake loose our own wisdom. Vincent Harding, the great historian and civil rights leader, said in an interview 10 years ago, "To develop the best humanity, the best spirit, the best community, there needs to be discipline, practices of exploring." How do you do that, he asks? How do we work together? How do we talk together in ways that will open up our best capacities and our best gifts? I have some thoughts. We need to be intentional about our desire to connect, to find out what it's like to be someone that you're curious about. And we need to adopt a beginner's mind. For me right now, this means learning about the neuroscience of empathy and somatic healing practices, which will regulate our nervous systems and heal trauma. This came home to me in a big way last summer, when my daughter and I found ourselves in a serious emotional crisis. I would later learn that she was suffering from depression, brought on by compounded trauma. But at the time, all I knew was that something felt really broken between us. We stopped communicating. She withdrew and I pursued. Not a winning combination. A close friend suggested that I do something radical. Get genuinely curious about how it feels to be her. Ask questions without edges. Actively listen and suspend judgment. A much needed wake-up call for me. Within weeks, I could see the results. She felt seen and heard and respected, which allowed her to trust me again, to accompany her out of depression and back to wholeness. This experience, in the midst of so much collective trauma, inspired me to learn more about what I can do to repair the broken places in myself, my family, and my community. Since then, I've been studying with a teacher. Her name is Catherine Revoire, who combines neuroscience and nonviolent communication to construct an empathy practice that changes the way I communicate and the way I care for others. I'm learning to identify my feelings at the moment they're happening, and then ask myself, what is the unmet need underneath that feeling? So for example, I'm feeling angry. Do I have a need for respect? I'm feeling lonely. Do I have a need for friendship? Connecting my feelings and needs makes sense to my brain, and my body feels more settled as a result. The next step is to ask for what I need. Now, this could be revolutionary for some of us. Ask for what I need. This practice of naming what is true for us in the moment and asking for what we need regulates our nervous system. It settles our body. Catherine calls this a happy brain. Resmaa Menon, the author of My Grandmother's Hands, a book about racialized trauma and healing, says, few skills are more essential than the ability to settle your body. A settled body enables you to harmonize and connect with other bodies around you, while encouraging those bodies to settle as well. Gather together a large group of unsettled bodies, and you get a mob, or a riot, or an insurrection. But bring a large group of settled bodies together, and you have a movement, a force for tremendous good in the world. Every chapter of Menachem's book contains practices for settling our bodies. We can teach ourselves to mend and grow up, he says, because as long as we're alive, none of us is done. We will need to create new culture, a new ethos, one in which we center respect, caring, and a willingness to help others, so that we can repair the places where trust has been broken. We are living through a period of extraordinary social change. I ask myself, what is within my power to do? Then I listen for the answers. Learn about racial trauma and the systems that oppress people. Sharpen skills for self-reflection and active listening. Look within. Identify my stuck places. Connect with my ancestors and the stories I may have inherited. Join groups that practice nonviolent communication. Learn to care for myself so I can care for others. Seek to know people who are different from me. Learn to settle my body. Ask others to join me. If you're the leader of anything, a family, a Girl Scout troop, a business, a school, or a city, I ask you to commandeer this kind of change. Join me as I make a vow to myself, my ancestors, my children, and my unborn grandchildren to do everything I can to help negotiate new social contracts, to demand our democracy works for everyone, and to preserve the planet that we share. Because we're the living ones right now. This is ours to do. Thank you.
Kate, thank you so much. That was absolutely stunning. And I hope you get a chance to look at some of the comments that came in through the chat while you were speaking. There's so much love for you there. And I think there were a lot of people that were asking about some of the resources, the books, Resmaa Menachem's books, My Grandmother's Hands, and we'll be sharing Kate's sermon and some of the ideas, the links, the people that she mentioned in a follow-up email following the gathering. But Kate, that was absolutely gorgeous. And the last thing that I have to say, because this is true, anytime one of my friends meets Kate, they just want to continue to hear her speak. And so I think all of you probably understand now why after hearing her sermon, but we always come away wanting more, and today was no different. So thank you so much, Kate. So now I'm gonna turn it over. I'm really excited to turn it over one last time to Terra Naomi, who's going to lead us in one more song at this gathering. Thank you, Terra.
Thank you, Anshal and Kate. That was just so powerful and connecting, and I can't wait to tap into what you're doing and learn more about it and more about you and get involved with some of the things that you are bringing forth in the world. I was so inspired by everything you shared with us. So thank you. And I'm going to play a song called Help You Fly. It's a song about community, and it's a song about finding those folks who lift you up and support you. And especially in these times that we're in, it's easy to find places to sort of commiserate. And I believe what's needed is celebration whenever and wherever we can, together with folks who uplift us, which feels very much like what we're doing right now. So this is a song of mine called Help You Fly. misery loves her company. Got a party gathered around you now. They come running from far and wide, but who's gonna help you fly? And they come calling when you're falling down. Someone always pick you up off the ground. Nobody wanna see you cry, but who's gonna help you fly? Whoa. That I live in feels smaller every day. It's like a little town. Someone always gonna help you get by, but who's gonna help you fly? And it's a messed up situation when I got the world to call on when the well runs dry. But I just wanna celebrate my life, wanna find someone to help me fly. Whoa, 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 whoa. Who's gonna help me fly? Whoa, 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 whoa. Till I'm feeling like I'm high, I wanna fly. So say you stay with me tonight. We can sit under the stars shine. Gonna love you till the morning light. I wanna fly. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Terra. Hey, everybody. My name is Duncan Magidson. Anshul introduced me earlier, but I'm going to be leading us into the next portion of our call, which is Civic Circles. Terra, you were talking before we started the call about how difficult it is to sing while tearing up, but I don't know how you avoid it. That was so beautiful and such a wonderful compliment to Kate's sermon. So thank you so much for being here today. As I mentioned, the next part of our program is going to be Civic Circles. These are small group breakouts, conversations to learn from each other, to discuss your experience today and think about the next steps that each of us have to take as powerful, responsible citizens. Today's Civic Circles are going to be about 15 minutes long, and we're going to ask you to discuss 3 questions that are inspired by today's gathering. And I will put these in the chat box right now so you can see them.
The first one is, you heard a little bit about individualism versus collectivism today. And we want you to think about, is the American idea of individualism still working for our society? Why or why not? You can also discuss, how might corporations and government operate differently these days to embrace the idea of civic care? Or should the idea of operationalizing civic care fall on individuals as their personal responsibility? Finally, and we know you won't have time for all three of these, but we encourage you to think about what gets you most inspired and interested in the conversation. What is one idea you heard today related to civic care which resonated with you? We encourage you in these conversations to step up and step back. If you are a shy person, challenge yourself to speak up. If you're more talkative, challenge yourself to step back and listen more. I'm going to place you into the small breakout rooms in a second. If you have been relying on our captions today to understand the speakers, know that they will not be available during the breakout rooms. If you need to be in a conversation with captions, I invite you to leave your breakout room and join me in the main session. Otherwise, try to remember the number of the room you're in case you get kicked out. I can place you back in the same room. I will close the breakout rooms at 4 minutes to the hour, but at that point, you will get a notification that you have 60 seconds before the rooms close. And one final thing, if your first name is first alphabetically among the people in your group, so listen up, if your name is first alphabetically, your first name, we're going to designate you the timekeeper, and your only job is to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak in your room. So we're deputizing you with a little bit of responsibility. So I'm going to open up these conversations right now, and I hope that these conversations are productive and fulfilling.
Hi, everyone. We hope you had a chance to enjoy connecting with others in your civic circles. And I'm so sorry. I know we never have enough time for these breakouts, but I do want to thank you all for coming together on your Saturday afternoon. And I also want to just end the gathering the way we began, with care. And today's sermon was all about activating civic care in our communities, as Kate explained. And I just want to acknowledge everyone who gave their time, energy, and care to make this gathering happen, including Encore.org and all of our speakers, Uma, Terra, Kitty, Kate, and Duncan. Thank you so much. And in the last 2 minutes that we have, I want to invite Uma to share one more poem.
Thank you so much. I just want to end on a poem called Ghazal for All the World. What will become of a burning world when ice melts her feet on this burning world? The Himalaya mountains smile in pain. They know the taste of a churning world. A breeze morphs, whisks away his sun before he jolts on this turning world. An apple that rolls at the base of a tree is tossed far beyond this learning world. Here, a parade for a shining girl. There, a star and a yearning world. A galaxy dissolves its own withering face. Lost is the bliss of this returning world. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Uma. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you all at a future Civic Saturday gathering. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.